The sound of barking echoed down the sterile white halls of the county animal shelter. Rows of metal kennels lined the dimly lit corridor, each one housing a dog, some with hopeful eyes and wagging tails, others lying dejectedly in the corners of their small enclosures. It was late in the afternoon, just after closing time, and the air hung heavy with a sense of finality. In a small kennel at the far end of the shelter sat two dogs. Their muzzles gray with age, their coats thinning, and their bodies showing the unmistakable signs of time's relentless march. Rex, a large German Shepherd mix with a thick coat of black and tan fur, rested protectively beside Molly, a smaller golden-colored retriever mix with soft, gentle eyes. The two had been at the shelter for 8 years, an eternity in a place where younger, more vibrant dogs came and went in quick succession. They had been found separately as strays when they were younger, Rex wandering the outskirts of town near an old industrial park, and Molly discovered abandoned near a highway rest stop. Despite coming from different places, something about their mutual loneliness and weariness had drawn them together. Over time they had become inseparable. They ate together, slept together, leaned on each other, forming a quiet bond that seemed to transcend words. But today was different. Today was their last day. Rex and Molly had been deemed unadoptable due to their age and health issues. The shelter was at capacity, and as always, difficult decisions had to be made. Their euthanasia had been delayed for weeks, held off in the hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would come in and adopt them both. But no one had. With Rex suffering from arthritis so severe that he could barely stand some days, and Molly developing a heart condition that made her breathing labored, the decision had finally been made. Dr. Harper, the head veterinarian at the shelter, walked down the corridor with a heavy heart. The clipboard in her hand felt like a lead weight. She was no stranger to these decisions. Over the years she had learned how to compartmentalize, how to keep herself from being overwhelmed by the endless cycle of hope and heartbreak that defined shelter work. But something about Rex and Molly made this time harder than usual. She had seen them grow old together. She had watched them greet each other every morning, licking one another's faces as if to say, "We're still here." She had seen Rex lie down next to Molly when she wasn't feeling well, his large frame curling around her smaller body like a shield. Dr. Harper wasn't the only one who noticed. The entire staff had a soft spot for the pair. But the reality of shelter life meant that resources were limited, and difficult decisions had to be made. Younger, healthier dogs were more adoptable. And Rex and Molly's time had run out. As she approached their kennel, Dr. Harper felt the familiar knot of guilt tighten in her chest. She glanced down at the clipboard one last time, trying to steady her nerves. She hated this part of her job, and yet it was a necessary evil. She knew that allowing them to continue suffering from their ailments would be cruel. But still, the finality of it felt unbearable. Dr. Harper opened the door to the kennel and stepped inside. Rex and Molly were huddled together as they often were, their heads resting on each other in a pose that exuded comfort and resignation. But something was different. This time Rex had both his front paws wrapped around Molly, in a clear, deliberate embrace. His large body was curled tightly around hers. Molly had nestled her head against his chest, her eyes closed, peaceful. They weren't just lying together as they normally did. This was something else. It was a hug. A true embrace. The kind you'd see between two humans saying goodbye. It was as though they understood what was about to happen. As if they were comforting each other in their final moments. Dr. Harper froze, blinking back tears, her breath catching in her throat. She had worked with animals her entire life, but she had never seen anything like this. The gesture was so deliberate, so human-like in its tenderness, that it sent a shiver down her spine. She knelt beside them, her eyes welling with tears. Rex slowly opened one of his deep brown eyes and looked up at her. There was a sense of quiet acceptance in his gaze, but also something else. A flicker of awareness, of understanding. He knew. They both did. A sudden wave of emotion surged through Dr. Harper. He couldn't do this. Not yet. Something was telling her to stop. To hold on just a little longer. "Jess," she called out, her voice trembling slightly as she stood up. Jess, the shelter assistant, had been cleaning kennels at the far end of the room. She looked up, her eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "What's wrong, Dr. Harper?" she asked, setting down her cleaning supplies and walking over. "Bring me the scanner," Dr. Harper said urgently. "I want to check their chips one more time." Jess gave her a puzzled look. We've already scanned them 100 times. There's no information. No owners. No history. I know, Dr. Harper replied, swallowing hard. But something doesn't feel right. I just need to check again. Jess shrugged and fetched the handheld microchip scanner from the nearby desk. She knelt beside Rex first, pressing the scanner to his neck. The familiar beep sounded and the same information appeared on the screen. Rex, stray, no known owner. Found near the industrial park 8 years ago. Nothing unusual there. She moved on to Molly, scanning her neck next. The device beeped, again displaying the same data. Molly, stray, no owner. Abandoned near the highway. Just as Jess was about to pull the scanner away, something strange happened. The scanner beeped again, louder this time, and a new piece of information flashed across the screen. Jess's eyes widened in shock. Dr. Harper, you need to see this. Her voice was shaky as she handed the scanner over. Dr. Harper took the device, her heart pounding. She looked down at the small screen, her breath catching in her throat. Displayed clearly on the screen. Molly, registered to the United States Army K-9 unit. What? Dr. Harper whispered, her mind racing. This couldn't be right. Molly had been listed as a stray for years. How could she have been registered to the military? Jess, equally stunned, said, there's no way. She's been here for 8 years. Why would the military? Before they could finish processing what they had just discovered, Jess quickly ran the scanner over Rex again. The machine chirped loudly, and another new entry appeared on the screen. Rex, registered to the United States Army K-9 unit. Dr. Harper's mind reeled. Both dogs? Registered to the military? How had no one known this? How had they ended up here, forgotten, in an overcrowded shelter for nearly a decade? We need to call the military, Jess said, her voice barely above a whisper. There's got to be some explanation. Dr. Harper nodded, still in shock. Get me the number for the nearest base. We need to figure this out, immediately. For the next several hours, the shelter was a flurry of activity. Dr. Harper and Jess worked tirelessly, making phone calls, gathering records, and piecing together the dog's history. As they dug deeper, a remarkable story began to unfold. Rex and Molly had served together as part of a specialized K-9 unit for the United States Army. They had been deployed overseas, providing crucial support to soldiers in war zones, sniffing out explosives and performing search and rescue missions. The two had been partners, trained together, deployed together, and inseparable during their time in the military. But after one particularly dangerous mission, things had gone wrong. The details were hazy, but the records indicated that the dogs had been separated from their handlers during a chaotic extraction. They were listed as missing in action, and presumed lost for years. Somehow Rex and Molly had survived. They had found their way back, though no one knew exactly how, and they had ended up as strays. Eventually brought to this small, understaffed shelter, where they had languished for 8 long years, unnoticed and forgotten. By the time Dr. Harper and Jess finally managed to reach the appropriate military officials, the story had spread quickly through the chain of command. Within hours, arrangements were made for Rex and Molly to be transferred to a specialized retirement program for military working dogs, where they would live out their remaining years in comfort and care. The next morning, a representative from the military arrived at the shelter. Dr. Harper stood by the kennel watching as Rex and Molly were gently let out, side by side as always. The dogs looked back at her, their eyes filled with the same quiet understanding they had shown the day before. "They're heroes," the representative said, shaking his head in disbelief as he looked down at the 2 old dogs. "And they saved each other." As Dr. Harper watched Rex and Molly leave the shelter for the last time, she felt a profound sense of relief wash over her. They had come so close to the end, only to be saved at the very last moment. Their bond had carried them through the darkest times. Rex and Molly's departure from the shelter was nothing short of miraculous. Dr. Harper stood still, her eyes fixed on the pair as they walked out, side by side, through the shelter doors. The military representative, Sergeant Mitchell, who had come to escort them, was a grizzled man in his late 40s. He had a deeply lined face that spoke of years of service, yet his eyes softened as he watched the 2 old dogs with reverence. "I've seen plenty of K9s in my time," he said, his voice gravelly but respectful. "But what they did for each other, it's rare. You don't see that kind of loyalty very often." Dr. Harper nodded, her throat tight with emotion. I didn't realize how special they were, she admitted, still processing the gravity of everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. They were just two old strays. I didn't know they had a story. I didn't know they were heroes. They've always been heroes, Sergeant Mitchell replied, giving Rex a firm, respectful pat on the head as he bent down to inspect Molly's paw. Now they're going to get the treatment they deserve. As he said it, the dog seemed to sense something had shifted. Molly's tired eyes blinked up at Sergeant Mitchell, and she gave a small, tentative wag of her tail, as if she recognized something in his demeanor. Rex, always the protective one, stayed close to her side, his large frame still poised like a guardian. Dr. Harper felt a lump in her throat as she watched them. 8 years. 8 long, lonely years in this shelter. Waiting, hoping, neither of them knowing their past would come back for them. She had been about to end their lives. Now they were walking toward a second chance, something many dogs in the shelter never got. Sergeant Mitchell stood up straight and cleared his throat. They'll be taken to a special facility for retired K9s. It's quiet, peaceful, just outside the city. They'll get medical care, proper food, and most importantly, they'll be treated with the respect they've earned. He looked down at the dogs with admiration. Dogs like these, they've seen things, been through things that we'll never know. It's only right that they get to rest now. Dr. Harper glanced at Jess, who was standing nearby, still wide-eyed from everything that had transpired. Jess had barely said a word since the moment they discovered Rex and Molly's history. It had been an overwhelming day, even for someone who had worked with animals for years. Dr. Harper could see the tears brimming in her assistant's eyes as they both took in the scene before them. I still can't believe it, Jess whispered, her voice thick with emotion. They hugged each other, Dr. Harper. They were saying goodbye, weren't they? Dr. Harper nodded, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, they knew. But as she watched the dogs being led away, she realized something else. They hadn't just been saying goodbye. They had been protecting each other, just as they had done all those years in the military. It was that bond, that unspoken connection, that had kept them alive through whatever horrors they had seen on the battlefield. And, as Sergeant Mitchell led Rex and Molly out to the waiting military vehicle, something happened that took Dr. Harper by surprise. Rex, normally stoic and calm, suddenly turned his head to look back at her. His deep brown eyes, so wise, so full of life and experience, seemed to hold hers for a long moment. There was no sadness in his gaze. No fear. Only gratitude. It was as if he was saying, "Thank you for seeing us. For saving us." Molly too paused as she walked beside Rex, her golden fur shimmering softly in the late afternoon light. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod of her head, a gesture of thanks, before following her partner into the car. Dr. Harper stood frozen as the vehicle pulled away, her heart heavy, but full. She had come so close to losing them, to letting them slip away into the darkness. But now, against all odds, they had a future. They had each other. And as she watched them disappear down the road, she knew deep in her heart that they had always been meant for something greater. Weeks passed and Rex and Molly thrived in their new environment. Dr. Harper had received updates from Sergeant Mitchell, and each time she heard from him, the news was more uplifting. The retirement facility for military K9s was an oasis of calm, far from the chaos of the shelter and the battlefield. The facility was set on a sprawling piece of land complete with wide open fields, shady trees, and even a small pond where the dogs could cool off on warm days. Rex had been given special medication for his arthritis, and while he would never move as quickly as he once did, the treatments had helped him regain some of his strength. Molly, meanwhile, had been receiving care for her heart condition, and under the watchful eyes of the facility's vets, she was recovering well. They spent their days lounging in the sun, side by side, just as they had always done. But now they had space, freedom, and the peace they deserved. One day, Dr. Harper received a phone call from Sergeant Mitchell that would change everything again. "We found their handler," he said, his voice steady but filled with excitement. "The soldier who trained and worked with Rex and Molly. He thought they were gone, lost for good. When we told him they were alive and well, let's just say he's eager to see them." Dr. Harper's heart leaped in her chest. "You found him? After all this time?" Sergeant Mitchell chuckled. "It took some digging. The military doesn't exactly keep track of retired handlers like they do the dogs. But we got lucky." He's coming to see them next week. Dr. Harper could hardly believe what she was hearing. Rex and Molly were about to be reunited with the one person who had meant the most to them during their years of service. The thought filled her with joy and anticipation, but also a strange sense of anxiety. How would the dogs react after all these years? Would they remember him? Would they understand? The day of the reunion arrived quickly. Dr. Harper couldn't resist the urge to be there herself. She arrived at the K9 retirement facility early in the morning, her heart racing with anticipation. She had grown so attached to Rex and Molly, and she couldn't wait to see how they would react when they saw their old handler again. The handler's name was Sergeant Chris Reynolds, a tall man with broad shoulders and a kind smile. He had served multiple tours overseas, relying on Rex and Molly to help him navigate dangerous terrain, detect explosives and save lives. As he walked into the facility's courtyard, his steps faltered. His eyes landed on the two dogs lying in the shade of a tree. Dr. Harper stood beside him, watching intently. Rex and Molly, older now, grayer, lifted their heads at the sound of approaching footsteps. Rex was the first to react. His ears perked up, and for a moment his body tensed. He rose to his feet slowly, his old bones creaking with effort. But there was something in the way he moved. A sense of recognition. Molly too lifted her head. Her soft brown eyes blinked as if trying to make sense of the figure walking toward them. And then, as if a switch had flipped, her tail began to wag, slowly at first, building momentum as the memory seemed to flood back into her. Sergeant Reynolds crouched down. His hands were trembling slightly. "Rex." "Molly," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Rex took a hesitant step forward. His gaze never left Reynolds. And then, in an instant, something extraordinary happened. Rex's posture changed. His tail wagged. And with a burst of energy no one had expected from the old dog, he rushed forward, almost stumbling but determined, to reach his old handler. Molly followed close behind, her tail wagging so hard it seemed to shake her whole body. She let out a soft, high-pitched whimper of joy as she reached Reynolds and pressed her head against his chest. Tears filled Sergeant Reynolds' eyes as he wrapped his arms around them both. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I thought you were gone." Dr. Harper stood back, tears streaming down her own face as she watched the reunion unfold. Rex and Molly hadn't just survived. They had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for the one person who had been their world during their years of service. And now, they were together again. Family once more. In the months that followed, Rex and Molly spent their days with Sergeant Reynolds. He visited the retirement facility often, taking them on walks through the fields, playing with them in the shade of the trees, and sitting with them by the pond where they could rest in the cool water. The bond they shared with him had never been broken. And now, in the twilight of their lives, they were finally able to experience the peace and love they had earned through years of service and sacrifice. Dr. Harper continued to visit them as well, her heart full each time she saw the three of them together. Rex, Molly, and Sergeant Reynolds. It was a happy ending, one she had never expected when she walked into the shelter that fateful day. Rex and Molly had been more than just strays. They had been soldiers, survivors, friends, and now, they were home. In the end, it wasn't just their bravery or loyalty that had saved them. It was the love they had for each other. The bond that had carried them through every challenge, every heartbreak, and every moment of uncertainty. That bond had saved their lives. And it would carry them through whatever time they had left. And as Dr. Harper looked at them lying together in the grass, she knew one thing for certain. Rex and Molly's story was far from over.